Hey everybody, this is Way to Fail with another Scrolls update. This is from the test server, and today we're going to be taking a look at new cards for Energy, as Energy is getting 10 cards added to the set there to make set 1, and they do have some pretty interesting cards. I like a lot of these cards, but let's go ahead and take a look and get started, because Energy players, you all know you need some love. I don't know if this is going to knock Energy up to viability, but definitely in the current metagame, anything that can help Energy is great. So let's get started. First card on the list is a Canonetta, which is another tribes person. And an interesting new mechanic that's been introduced with the Canonetta is piercing. When the Canonetta deals damage, half of that damage rounded down is dealt to the next target on that row. Which means if there's 2 enemies on the row, the first one will get 2, second one will get 1. If you buff the attack though, then there's other things as well. And I assume with just anything that gives it extra attacks, the piercing will apply there just as well. Gotta say though, badass gun. Great art there. So Canada, 3 resources. There's already a lot of cards that cost 3 resources for Energy, but I do think this card could get some play. Next one on the list is Corrode. Units you control deal double damage to idols until end of turn. If at least one idol is destroyed, draw 1 scroll. Interesting. I don't really see too many of these kind of decay cards being played because you gotta actually be gunning for the idols here. But I do think it's an okay addition, especially with the card draw. It's nice to have that possibility. Still, maybe a little bit too situational, I'm not sure. Next on the list is Dark Strike. I really like this card. It's essentially a Scorch, 2 damage on the unit for 3 resources, but if that unit's destroyed, get 1 decay. So this is going to be really good for Energy Decay, which I do expect to see more of that. I'm actually seeing quite a few people test those decks out, at least in unranked play. But I think Dark Strike is going to be a really good, widely seen card. It is probably of the resource ramps that have been introduced in these. You heard me talk a little bit about how I didn't like Growth's one. I do think Dark Strike is the best of them, of the old resources for ramping Decay, because you get to do damage and you get something out of it. So pretty nice. Next on the list is Machinated, or Machinated, however you want to pronounce it. I'm not entirely sure about this card. It's going to be good for a weenie deck though, because it's 2 resources, and the attack's increased by 5. That's huge. Countdown is increased by 1, however. So that kind of mitigates or counteracts one or the other. Now granted, Energy does have some ways to speed up cards a little bit. If you Bombard, that can knock down the cooldown. If you Iron Whip or Frenzy, there's all kinds of ways that you can counteract that 1 countdown there. I do expect this to see some play, at least for burst damage, plus it's an enchantment, so it stays on the board. Of course, if you put it on something like a well, just any sort of card that has a cooldown reduction with cost there, then you just pay more resources, and there you go. But still, Machinated, good card. 2 resources is really a nice sweet spot for this enchant, because that means dual color decks will be able to use it too. Machine Chant. Deal damage to target unit equal to the number of structures you control. Increase energy by 1. And that's something where for maybe other resources, I don't know. But Energy actually, with things like Automata Forges, with things like Metal Wonders, they are going to have a lot of structures on there. So, I mean, it's a possibly a good card. The catch, and it is a huge one, is that it costs 5 energy. Now, you do get an energy buff from it, but I think that cost maybe, I don't know, maybe a little steep. Especially since there's no requirement to destroy the unit, but you don't want to have too many structures out as energy, or else you're just going to start clogging your own board. Or at least that depends on strategy. But I think that may be over budgeted, possibly, although the resource ramp is pretty key for the value of that card. Next on the list is a Machine Divinator, which is also a tribesman as well, and this card looks interesting. I'm curious to hear from those of you who play Energy a little bit more how you might use this, because I'm not exactly sure if this is going to see a lot of play though. Let's look at the description. The Divinator does not attack. When Divinator is in play, your structure's health is increased by 1, which is kind of like Order's Shrine, which sees absolutely no play. When Machine Divinator's countdown becomes 0, random structure you control with countdown 1 or more has its countdown decreased by 1. So that's something like the Automata Forges once again, or not Clock Tower, but any of the, and I apologize for suddenly blanking on the names of these cards, but any of these structures with a countdown by 1, ether pumps, things like that. I think it's okay. I mean, you really got to have a deck that's kind of built towards it, but even then, it's this is something that happens every turn. That's probably the biggest value of this card, is that every turn you're gonna get one resource pump, and if you have to pay resources to do that, that's resources saved to put somewhere else. So I think it's an interesting card, but I don't, like I said, energy is something that I like watching people play, but I don't have as much personal experience with. So I'd love to see you all's feedback on this card. Scout Automaton, on the other hand, oh boy, you're going to see a lot of this out there. Range attack, armor 1 for 3 resources, but most importantly, all other automatons you control get attack +1. So if you can get multiple of these on the board, this is very much an offensive gunning force. I really like this card. The art's also pretty nice, especially with the little bunny down there, because bunnies are dangerous. But yeah, very interesting to look at. This card's going to see some play. Of course, it's a rare, and like I said, 3 resources is kind of a crowded spot for energy, but still, very, very valuable card. Siege Cracker, which I don't really know about the name for sure, but this is another direct idol damage card, which is that he does 5 damage to idols. So if you're trying to make a direct idol damage deck, Mojang has kind of carved out that niche for decay, and it looks like they're carving out that niche for energy as well, especially with cards like Metal Wonder. Siege Cracker plays into that pretty nicely, because 5 idol damage is huge if you can free up that attack. And with cards like Violent Dispersal, it is possible for you to clear the way for this guy to just attack, so it's going to be kind of a scary target to work with. State Machine is a card that I have heard some people talk about, and I love the character art for this. But when it comes into play, when a creature comes into play on opponent's side, State Machine deals 1 damage to that creature. So any creature that comes down, if you Rat King, all those rats take 1 damage. But when the machine's countdown becomes 0, it's destroyed. So this is kind of a good, at least a little soften up everything that comes down. It's only cost of 3. And I don't know, there's a few cards that are floating around that could possibly increase the countdown of this a little bit. But you want this out to at least do a little bit of zappy damage. It's okay. Once again, it's 3 resources though, so like I said, that's a spot that you see that's very crowded here. Finally, Supercharged. At the beginning of each enchanted unit's owner's turns, enchanted unit makes a ranged attack dealing 1 damage. So it's just kind of like a little extra zap on there. And that's at the beginning of the turn too, which is important for how that resolves, because that does mean that could clear things or make other plays later in the turn a little bit easier. So that's a nice added benefit. Once again, it's only 2 resources for something that happens every turn. Now, it's an enchantment, so those things can eventually be removed or all of that, but it's an enchanted unit, so you can actually put this on a structure. It doesn't just have to be on a creature. So if you have a structure you're already trying to have survive or everything, then why not supercharge it? But hey, that's it for energy. Like I said, some pretty interesting cards. I really like the additions they're making to energy. Is it going to be enough to kind of thrust it back up to the 4? You know, I'm not entirely sure, but this is a step in the right direction, I would say, because these cards, a lot of them have some pretty interesting mechanics, and I look forward to seeing what people can do with them. As always, feel free to leave your feedback, especially those of you that play a little bit more energy than me, may have some better ideas for synergies. If there's any cards I missed, please let me know, because I'm sure there's something I'm missing here. But otherwise, that's it for now. This is Way to Fail. Next up is going to be a order preview. Woohoo! And then we're going to look at some other features that are coming with the update on Monday, October 21st. That's it for now. See you next time.